You're listening to the Industry Alchemist podcast. The definition of alchemy is a seemingly magical process of transformation or creation. This podcast exists to hear the stories of entrepreneurs, business owners, and leaders doing just that in their industry. We hear about the journey of the brave souls carving a new path, moving their industry and our lives forward in a seemingly magical way. This episode is brought to you by OfficeChief.com. Office Chief exists to make moving your office easy and painless. Moving an office can be a big hassle. On top of running your company, you're thrown into having to figure out what to do. Hire space planners, furniture companies, movers, IT consultants, the list goes on. It only takes 2 minutes to create a profile, and Office Chief gives you a step-by-step action plan and connects you with the top vendors in your market. Moving your office? Log on to OfficeChief.com and make it easy. I'm your host, Matt Brower, co-founder and managing broker of Column Commercial Partners, helping companies save money on their real estate. I'm also founder and CEO of OfficeChief.com, an online resource for businesses moving their office or updating their space.
Hey guys, welcome to the Industry Alchemist podcast. I'm your host, Matt Brower. Today's guest, his name is Dr. Peter McGraw. He's a behavioral economist and global expert in the scientific study of humor. He directs the Humor Research Lab, hosts the podcast I'm Not Joking, is the co-author of The Humor Code, and is the author of the recent book, Shtick to Business, What the Masters of Comedy Can Teach You About Breaking Rules, Being Fearless, and Building a Serious Career. He's a sought-after speaker and professor who teaches MBA courses for the University of Colorado Boulder, University of California, San Diego, and the London Business School. Welcome to the show, and thanks for being here, Peter McGraw.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Matt. I almost sound impressive with that introduction. Thank you for that.
Hey, I try. No, no, you are. I am very. So I got my degree in marketing, and I was looking through your LinkedIn actually a few days ago, and discovered that your education is in psychology and human behavior, and you bring your experience and further education is actually marketing as well, kind of your more senior level, PhD level studies and everything. And that's what I discovered when I got my degree in marketing is psychology.
Yes.
It's human behavior, it's sociology, and I love the tie between that.
Yeah, I agree. Like you could come at it, I think you come at it from one of two directions. Like you go to business school and you take all these sort of modeling classes and strategy classes. And then along the way, if you're lucky, you pick up a marketing perspective and then you realize, oh, it's really all about needs and wants and desires and satisfying those in novel ways. Or you come at it from my perspective, which is, well, there's this world where there's some things that all make us human, and then there's these things that make us different, right? So the same but different, and as a result, we have what we call heterogeneity, right? So people have different needs, and what the marketplace does very nicely, especially nowadays, is it's able to segment, and I'm going to give this group that, and I'm going to give that group this, and now two different groups of people can be equally happy with two very different solutions.
Right. Yeah. Kind of tailoring to the particular audience, like another way of saying that.
Yeah. I mean, I think this is a foundational idea in business is segmentation, targeting, and positioning. And it's something that in my MBA course, I basically tell my students, if you understand this basic principle, I have succeeded. And one of the things that I do on day one of my MBA course is I teach a model by which to understand what it means to live a good life. And this is work built on Martin Seligman's work called the PERMA model. And what it does is it suggests that there are multiple paths to living a good life. And not one path is right, not one path is wrong. It's just a matter of, are you walking the right path for you? And once you can understand that people are on different paths, then they have different needs. It just opens up a whole bevy of opportunities for business and for marketers to find ways to thrive in what seems to be an oversaturated competitive marketplace.
Yeah. Wow. So how do you teach your students to get to that, or to find out what living a good life means to their target or to their audience?
Yeah. So, unfortunately, that's like a whole other course that they don't let me teach yet. But I mean, one of the ways that I caution them. So there's both the like, okay, here's the great opportunity, but it's accompanied by caution, which is you can't use your good life as the example. Right? That is that you have to be very, very careful that your instincts, your desires, your wants are not going to be a good solution for this particular group of people. So I'll give you an example that's related to comedy. So comics are, in my opinion, master marketers. So that is that they're innovators, they're product innovators. So why is that the case? Well, the first reason is that novelty is so valued in comedy. Not only as a comic can you not tell jokes that are similar to other people's jokes, but you can't even tell jokes that are similar to the jokes you told in your last comedy special. And so you have to be hyper aggressive in coming up with new products all the time. Right? So the Rolling Stones can play Sympathy for the Devil every time that they perform and their audience is happy. And Coca-Cola can sell you the same beverage every single time. Actually, you want the same beverage every time. If it's different, you'd be upset. Right?
Yeah.
And comics can't do that. So they have developed these practices and perspectives, including something that is now state of the art in the world of business, which is to fail fast. This idea of being agile, the kind of lean startup mentality, the minimum viable product. Well, my joke is that vaudeville was the first lean startup, because what comics do is they have a hunch that this thing is going to be funny, this kernel of an idea. They try it out with a small audience. They gauge the reaction, and then they do what businesses do. They improve it, right? They dump it, or they go back to the drawing board with it. You know what I mean? They have this iterative process. And what they have to do is give up their initial thoughts, which is, oh, this is what's going to be good. And they start listening to their audience.
Oh my God. Brilliant analogy. Wow. That's so true. And the fact that they're constantly they're creating those new products, those new jokes constantly. Comedians do become masterful at it, which is basically what you're teaching.
Indeed, yes. And so I sprinkle in some sort of comedy lessons. So, for example, I have this great video of Jerry Seinfeld. So Jerry Seinfeld obviously is one of the masters of comedy. There's no doubt about it. The man's worth nearly $1 billion. So, he's good at what he does. But he's actually really an incredibly thoughtful fellow, not just about his craft, but sort of about everything in the world. And that curiosity obviously serves him for his style of comedy, observational comedy. But he, in an interview with Jesse David Fox, who I had on my comedy podcast, I'm Not Joking, he talked about how when Seinfeld was in syndication, the provider, the channel that was buying it, was seeing the ratings slip. The ratings were going down and down. Now, one of the interesting things about Seinfeld, the show, is that it actually did very, very well in syndication. And it has for many years, and it holds up pretty well, I think, in part because of the universality of the problems that they go through. But what happened was, like, Channel 5 was like, we're going to give it up. And so then, Channel 7 was like, well, we'll buy it. And you would, and the idea. And so what you would expect is that Channel 7 would just pick up where Channel 5 left off. And Seinfeld said the ratings went up with Channel 7. And he couldn't figure this out. It's like, why would this be the case? And then he had the realization there's not a bunch of people who like Seinfeld per se. There's just a bunch of Channel 5 people. And there's a bunch of Channel 7 people. And now you give them Seinfeld on 7 and they watch it. Right. It's like, and it takes like a little bit of a comedic perspective to start to figure that puzzle out.
Yeah, that's so it goes that deep with his career. I mean, nobody can argue he's masterful at what he does and very methodical about it.
Indeed.
Wow, that's interesting. How did you start down the journey of comedy being kind of what you study and what you teach? Was this a personal passion of yours prior to all this, or?
Not in the way that people often tell these stories of, I was just so passionate about this, I just had to do it. I mean, of course, I'm a fan of comedy. I grew up at a time where comedy was booming, in the 80s and 90s. You were getting stand-up specials and a rise of comedy clubs and so on. And so just like anyone else, though, I enjoyed it, not in any special way.
Right.
And I'd say, like, of course, I like telling jokes and being funny, and that's a little bit of my personality. But no one ever said to me, "Pete, you should really be a stand-up." Like, it was like, "Pete, by professor standards, you're pretty funny, and by comedian standards, you're pretty boring." That's sort of my level. But what happened was, I just stumbled onto this question of what made things funny about 10 years into my career. So it wasn't something I had ever read about, thought about, contemplated in any way. And when I stumbled onto the question of what makes things funny, like, essentially what happened was I was giving an academic talk about what makes things wrong, about moral violations, moral psychology. And someone pointed out how an example of an immoral behavior led the audience to laugh. And she was puzzled. She puzzled over that. She's like, you're talking about how moral violations cause anger and disgust, and yet we're laughing, we're expressing positive emotion. And I would say that it was my curiosity more than my passion that led me to study this. And it just started very small, in that sort of minimum viable product kind of way. I was like, let me write a paper about this. Let me start with one single paper. Now, dozens of papers later, 2 books later, TEDx talks later, a completely revamp of my entire professional life and frankly, personal life. But it all started with just this one question, a single paper. And the paper was so well received. And I realized, I have something here, that I decided to spend more and more time on it. Now I spend, the lion's share of my academic time on this topic.
Right. So you talked about, you briefly mentioned several books later. Was your first book The Humor Code? Looks like back in 2011.
Yeah, 2004. It feels, no, when was it? 2014. Yes.
Okay.
Boy, it's, it seems like a long time ago. But so yeah, that book, flies, it does. Yeah. That book was a lot of fun to do. So that, what a lot of people who write business books and write pop science books do, obviously when they write a memoir, is they're looking back on their career, their life, and summarizing big ideas. It takes 10, 20 years to really develop an idea. The Humor Code wasn't written like that. The Humor Code, my co-author, Joel Werner, a journalist, and I started it maybe 2 years into me studying humor. Oh. And so the book is placed in a different way. So it has a memoir element to it. It has a pop science element to it, but it's also a travel log. So what we do in that book, the subtitle is called A Global Search for What Makes Things Funny, is we travel the world to these faraway places to try to solve puzzles related to comedy. For example, why does comedy come from dark places? So we go to Palestine and look at the first sketch group that had a show on Palestinian national television. And so we also went this idea of, is laughter the best medicine? We went to the Amazon with Patch Adams and 100 hospital clowns to look at,
Oh my God.
does humor really help you cope? And so on. And so the book's kind of, it's kind of a buddy road trip comedy of sorts, but with more scientific insights than laugh out loud moments.
Right. Yeah. And that's an interesting thing to delve further into, because, we're all taught, or we all hear that, like the chemical changes in your brain that occur in your brain, the chemicals that get released when you laugh actually make your body, your mind and your body feel better, even if that laugh is fake. I've heard. I've taken part in this thing called laughing yoga.
Oh yes, I've done it. Yeah.
Have you? Yeah.
Yes.
I can't remember her name right now, but she lives actually in Boulder, Colorado, which is where you spend a lot of your time. She took a business group of mine through laughing yoga, and it was basically forced laughter for specific reasons or purposes. And I mean, it was just a great experience. And that was her point, is when you laugh, the chemicals that get released in your brain, delving into the psychology of it all. It's fascinating. So yeah, go ahead.
Oh yeah. So the fascinating thing about laughter yoga is this is what we call non-Duchenne laughter versus Duchenne laughter, which basically is fake laughter and real laughter. It's like fake, we have fake smiles, so the smile that you do when you're posing for a picture, or the smile that you have in genuine joyous moments. And and real laughter, which is fascinating because the laughter yoga starts with the fake laughter, but oftentimes transforms into true joyous laughter.
Yeah.
So you end up walking out of those sessions feeling really wonderful, energized, and positive.
Yeah, that's a great point. That is exactly what happened with our group. So
yeah, so there's all these they throw these laughter bombs into the circle. It's very it has a very improv-y kind of improvisational feel to it. It's a very game playing. It's really is designed to eventually create true laughter, especially if you get a group of people who are comfortable with each other together. Yeah. That's the ideal scenario, I think.
Okay. So tying humor to business, which now is, related to your most recent book, The Shtick of Business. Shtick to Business.
Yes.
Talk more about, let's dive into the correlation between those two, and how this book, I guess let's start by give us the gist of what this book's about.
Sure. Well, so let me tell you what the book's not about. So the book is not about being funnier at work. And the reason for that is, by the way, that was sort of my initial idea when I wanted to bring my day job teaching MBAs and my night job decoding comedy together. My first instinct was teach people about the benefits of being funny, go forth and be funny and profit, so to speak. And it's not that that's not true. It's just that it's difficult to do well. And so if I tell a ballroom at a keynote of 1,000 people to go forth and be funny, we really have to worry about that guy, the guy who thinks he's funny. And so while some people would benefit, their sales would be better, their customer service would be better, their leadership and management would be better, there's a bunch of those people who are underskilled who it would make everything worse, and it would make things really bad, awkward at best. And so and actually I talk about this idea in the book, what I call third thoughts. So the book wasn't my first thought. It wasn't my second thought, right? It was the results of creative processes often bear fruit when you just keep banging on a problem for a long time. You know, the number of solutions that you come up with predicts the creativity of the solution that you choose. And so I just waited and waited. It didn't feel right. And I was like, I'm not going to work on this idea. I'm going to find a different place. And if I can't find a way to bring these two worlds together, I'm not going to bring them together. I'm not going to force it. But so the insight was, don't be funny, rather think funny. So learn to think like the world's funniest people, because these are the most creative, innovative people around. They take a job that's so difficult, making people laugh on command, and they make it look easy. And whatever they do to make it look easy, we probably could stand to learn from. So I've already alluded to one of those things earlier, which is this sort of fail fast, minimum viable product perspective. And so what I do in the book is I present lessons for business based upon the practices and perspectives of the masters of comedy. And some of them are sort of marketing, branding, management related, and then some of them are more professional development, career development related.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I cannot wait to get a copy of this book. And you kind of give, well, at least in the description, you kind of give examples of, you mentioned what Tina Fey and Amy Poehler can teach you about creating disruptive innovation. Dave Chappelle, Joan Rivers are the blueprints of brand building. This is happening more and more in our world where, musicians, comedians, actors, like they are becoming, once they build their own brand, they then create a clothing line and they create all these other brands. And, the name of the game now is like, how can I get to billionaire status as fast as possible? There's a lot to learn from these individuals. So it's interesting. It's an interesting topic to really dive into.
Yeah, I have a chapter in the book called "Take a Bigger Stage," and in it, I present 3 ideas about a bigger place. You might need to move in order to take your career to the next level. You might need a bigger platform, so you might need more reach. So this is about distribution, and then you might need a bigger perspective. That is, you need to start thinking bigger. And one of the cool things about comedians are, these are people who are pursuing their dreams. They are seeking success in the way that the average person never really takes a big risk. And I think that they can be inspirational in that way. Putting
themselves literally on the line.
Indeed. Yeah. It's interesting because I didn't put this in the book because I couldn't decide if I agreed with the lesson. But I have another podcast called I'm Not Joking that looks at the lives of funny people. And I asked people, if you weren't doing what you are doing, what else would you do? Right? If you weren't a comedian, what would you be doing? And you'd be surprised how many comedians say, I'd be dead or in jail. That is, I mean, some of it's an easy laugh line, but I think some of them really believe it. That is, they don't have a plan B.
Mm-hmm.
It's either you succeed or you bleed out. And that's a wild idea, and it actually contrasts with another piece of advice that I often give. And that's why I didn't put it in the book, which is, no. You don't, you take care of business, you take care of your bills, you get a job that's steady, and then you create a side hustle. And then you see, can your side hustle become your full-time hustle?
Right.
So never risk bleeding out, so to speak.
Right.
And so I just think some of it's about how you're wired and what you need to motivate yourself. Like, I've never been one who needed extra motivation to take on a side hustle or a second side hustle or a third side hustle. But some people need it to be, you're burning the boats behind you is the only way that they're going to do it. So I just never felt comfortable with that. But I was surprised by the number of comics who they have no plan B.
Yeah, that's it. They're making it or nothing.
Or nothing.
Wow.
Yeah.
Which is probably a lot of the reason for their success.
Well, yeah, it forces you to do the work. It forces you to be creative. It forces you to be different, because being the same in comedy is a lot like being the same in business. That is, now you have to compete on price. And that's no way to live, right? Just by
Right.
lowering prices. And in comedy, too often they already expect you to work for free. So it's only the elites who really make their way.
Yeah, it's kind of turning your business into a commoditized thing that's the opposite of what we're all striving for.
Indeed. Yes.
That's great. So what's how can the listeners find your book? What platforms are you available on?
It's Amazon, as almost everything else in the world is. So there's a ebook, softcover, and Audible. Warning to your listeners: if you don't like listening to me, do not get the Audible, because I unfortunately read it. But one of the fun things about that is I have a comedian friend named Shane Moss, who chimes in every so often in what I call shtick from Shane, where he talks about his own personal experiences related to the lessons that I'm talking about. And fortunately, he does it in his voice. And so it has that nice little sort of palate cleansing part
That's
to the
great.
Audible book. And then I'm at petermcgraw.org. I'm on Twitter at Peter McGraw, Instagram at Peter McGraw, LinkedIn. I'm happy to connect with people.
Awesome. Well, that's great. Congrats on the new book, and I'm sure the success of the prior book. I want to ask, kind of wrap this with just some rapid fire questions, so we can get to know you on a deeper level personally. And you can take as much time as you want, or as quickly. Do you have any books that have? I mean, I'm sure you probably utilize a lot of business and marketing books to teach your courses. Have there been any books that you've read over the years that have been very impactful to you personally with what you do, what you teach?
Boy, yeah, I could take up an hour talking about this. So I just got back from a reading retreat. So I went away for 5 days with a huge pile of books and consumed them, and have come back with a bunch of ideas. I'll just give you a few off the top of my head. There's so many. There's a book by David Schwartz called The Magic of Thinking Big. It's an old book. Feels very Dale Carnegie-esque kind of book. It's a little dated, but in the book, he makes the case that if you want to accomplish great things in life, you have to start thinking bigger. And you have to behaving like someone who thinks big. And as for someone who grew up kind of poor, I found that to be a useful starting point to just kind of energize me and try to get me to think differently than I do. There's a variety of books by Cal Newport. One book called So Good They Can't Ignore You. The other one that I really liked called Deep Work, that is about how do you pursue success. That's there. There's another book, I can't remember the Scott Belsky, I think is his name, a book called Making Ideas Happen. Both the Cal Newport books and the Belsky books influenced my thinking in Shtick to Business. So I talk about, you can come up with an idea alone, but you need others to execute an idea. And so comedians, even the stand-up comic needs others. They need bookers. They need an audience to help them develop their material. So this idea of how do you collaborate well with others in order to make the thing that you want to make. Another book that I'm reading right now is called The Rational Optimist by Matt Ridley. And I like that book because anybody who's going to go into business really in many ways needs to be a rational optimist. Like if you're a pessimist, why would you ever try to start a business with the failure rates? If you think that the world is just going to hell in a handbasket, why are you going to try to make it better? Yeah. And so Matt Ridley puts forth a very persuasive case about how innovation has and will continue to make the world a better place to live. Now, of course, there's going to be hiccups. Obviously, COVID is one of the ones that is, we're going to have to deal with for another 6+ months or so. And it's devastating, clearly. But that doesn't make me any less bullish about life in the world we're living in. And Ridley, I think, does a very nice job, better than the Steve Pinker book that does a similar thing. Not only puts forth the reasons, shows how the world's improved, but why it's improving. And frankly, the takeaway is about this idea of cooperation. The humans have the ability to cooperate. The ability to cooperate with a stranger is really quite important. So I'll leave you. That's enough for people's reading list, but those are some that have had a big effect on me.
That's great. Appreciate the list. And speaking of innovation, I mean, this pandemic is going to cause a massive amount of innovation over the next couple of years, more than we've probably ever seen in our lifetime. So I'm excited to see what comes of it.
Yeah, because innovation comes, or again, creativity is about solving problems well and in a novel way. So I like to say creativity is an original, appropriate solution to a problem. Well, we have a whole bunch of new problems.
Yeah.
And so that's going to spur this. So I agree.
Yeah. How about any routines, any morning routines, or anything you do to, keep yourself on track, keep yourself moving forward, drive your success?
Yeah, so I do have a morning routine. I call it my ritual. I have a morning ritual. I think ritual is better than routine.
Yeah.
Well, I basically, I get up, I brush my teeth, I wash my face, I drink a bunch of water, and I get dressed. And as quickly as I can, I'm usually trying to find my way to a cafe or a coffee shop. And I order a delicious cappuccino, and I do creative work. For many, many years, that was writing. It still is often writing, but now it's expanded a little bit more broadly with me on sabbatical. So perhaps I journal or I read, but I engage in 1 to 4 hours of creative work. And I like going to a coffee shop. Right now it's difficult to do, clearly, but I like the energy of the place. I like that it's not at home. I like that it's not in the office. I like that it's sort of like there's some energy around me.
Yeah.
But it's like cappuccino and write is sort of the ritual.
That's great. It gets your brain, exercises your brain, and kind of gets the thoughts moving.
Absolutely. And this is sacred time. So I do not schedule dental appointments. I do not run errands. I do not tape podcasts, So for example, today, the earliest call I did was at 10 a.m. And, it's tough when people in the UK want to track me down, but I'm like, sorry. So it's sacred. Right. It's sacred time.
Right. Yeah. And you're sitting in San Diego right now, right? Or Los Angeles?
I'm in Hollywood. Well, I'm in my closet right now, but yes, I'm in Hollywood. Yeah.
Well, the acoustics sound amazing.
Thank you.
Perfect for podcasting. Oh, that's great. So last question, what would you consider your superpower to be? What is something you are great at that people may or may not know about you?
My superpower. Besides making to-do lists, I'm very good at making a to-do list. I love a good to-do list, and I love crossing off a to-do list. I will tell you this is, I think one of the things that I'm very good at is maintaining friendships. So I'm a lifelong bachelor. I actually have a podcast called Solo, The Single Person's Guide to a Remarkable Life. This is like a side hustle, kind of thing. And as someone who's now committed to not getting married, but or as a younger man was more ambivalent about it. And as I said, grew up poor. I always found that my friendships served more than just fun. They were more than just fun. They were places for information. They were places for support. They were places for inspiration. And as a result, I have always very carefully cultivated reliable, high integrity, energizing individuals. And I've always worked very hard to keep those people close, even when I might have been in a relationship. And so I do that very nicely, I think, with my friends. And then I do it pretty well with what I call my business friends. So these are people who I'm fond of in a more sort of career capacity.
Mm-hmm.
So I think people would say Pete's a good friend.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it an effortless thing for you, or are you intentionally making sure you reach out, be there?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I would say this: it's not intentional like many of the things in my life are intentional, where I try to eat 2 salads a day, and I do my ritual in the morning, and I make my to-do list. But what I am good about doing is if I have a thought, like my instincts are good. Like, oh, Pete, you haven't talked to Dan in a while. And so then I'll put it on my day to give Dan a call.
Yeah.
The thing. The one place that I do have a kind of ritual around it is when I'm doing a drive. So hands-free in the car, instead of listening to music or podcasts, I get on the phone.
That's a great time.
So I have kind of a rotation of people who pick up the phone, and then I have a group of people who I might just give it a shot.
Yeah.
And if you're my friend and you pick up the phone, you get more phone calls. And if you're my friend and you don't pick up the phone, you get a scheduled call.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's great. I could definitely use more of that. I have very fortunate to have a lot of friends. I'm not the greatest at keeping in communication with them, but that's the time I use in the car as well as use that time to be in communication. So
yeah, I joke I give good phone. So I've had girlfriends who don't talk on the phone. No one really talks on the phone that much anymore. Everybody wants to text.
Right.
And I've had them, and I've kind of brought them around, where they say to me, the only 2 people I talk to on the phone is you and my mother.
My mom. Yeah.
Exactly.
You know what I've been receiving a lot and actually starting to do a lot more is, and actually Stephanie McHugh, who introduced us, our mutual friend, she's somebody that's great at this. She will record a voice message and send that recording as a text. And so I can, receive it, click go, and hear her voice. And like, it's not talking, but it's better than a text. It's a little more personal than a text. And I find that to be, really cool.
Yeah, Matt, I'm glad you brought that up. I just discovered this recently through a friend, and I think I'm going to start doing it much more, especially because my thumbs are terrible. They're too fat. And so I just I mistype everything, and Siri hates me, so autocorrects things wrong. And so, I think that it's a nice in between. Yeah, it's very nice in between.
Great. Well, Peter, I have very much enjoyed the conversation. Thanks for sharing your wisdom and telling us about the book and making the correlations between. Just such a great analogy of what makes a business successful. Most of the listeners here are entrepreneurs and business leaders and those that are looking to level up whatever it is they're doing. So this is great info for that. So and I'm going to go get a copy of the book and I'm sure a lot of listeners here are too. So
well, it's
thanks
my
again
pleasure.
for your time. Great. Enjoy the rest of your day, Peter.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.